In 2019, researchers asked American adults a single, basic question. If you invest $1,000 at 5% annual interest, how much will you have after 5 years? Fewer than 3 out of 10 answered correctly. These were not teenagers or students. They were working adults. People with mortgages, car loans, and retirement accounts they barely understand. People who have earned money for decades without ever learning how money actually functions. That same year, those same adults carried more than $14 trillion in personal debt, credit cards pushed to their limits, mortgages worth more than the homes they sit on, retirement savings that will not fund even 10 years of living. Nearly all of them can still tell you that mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, a fact learned decades ago and never used again. But almost none of them were taught the one thing that would have changed the direction of their lives: how money works, and why most people work until they die while a small group grows richer. This was not a mistake in education. This was the system operating exactly as intended. You have been working for years. You paid your taxes, made your payments, followed every rule you were given. You went to work, climbed the ladder, saved what you could. Yet it never feels like enough. Raises fall behind prices. Retirement accounts grow slower than promised. The house that was supposed to be an investment feels more like a weight you carry. And every financial advisor, every bank, every so-called expert repeats the same line. You should have started sooner. You should have saved more. You should have chosen better investments. But here is what they never say out loud. The system was never built for you to win. It was built to keep you working, spending, borrowing, and dependent. You were never taught how money truly works because people who understand money do not remain dependent on wages. They do not stay in debt for 30 years. They do not reach old age after 4 decades of work with nothing to show for it. Financial ignorance is not accidental. It is the foundation of an economy that runs on your labor and your debt. To understand why you struggle despite doing everything right, you have to go back to when this system was designed. Many believe the modern economy evolved naturally. It did not. In the early 1800s, Prussia created the first mandatory education system, not to make citizens wealthy, but to produce obedient workers and disciplined soldiers. The formula was simple. Teach people enough to follow instructions, but never enough to question authority. That model spread to America by the late 1800s, and industrialists embraced it. John D. Rockefeller helped fund the standardization of American education with a clear objective: create reliable workers, not independent thinkers. Schools taught reading and basic math because factories required it, but they avoided financial literacy because that would create competition. Workers who understood money might start businesses. They might demand real wages. They might build wealth instead of producing it for others. So the curriculum was carefully shaped. Teach enough to make people useful. Never teach enough to make them free. By the time you graduated, you had been trained for decades of labor and 0 years of wealth creation. That was not a coincidence. That was the design. Now look at what that design produced, because you are living inside it. In the 1970s, the American economy changed at its core. Credit cards became common, consumer debt surged, and personal finance quietly vanished from classrooms across the country. Not because of budget cuts, because the economy discovered something powerful. A population in debt is easier to manage. In 1975, the average household carried almost no credit card debt. Today, Americans owe nearly $1 trillion on credit cards alone. The typical household carries more than $6,000 in revolving credit card balances, paying interest rates between 16 and 24% on money already spent. That interest does more than hurt. It keeps you stuck. Every month, you work to pay for purchases made years earlier. The minimum payment keeps you afloat, never free. And the system depends on this. Banks earn tens of billions each year from that interest. Money pulled from your paycheck month after month, year after year, sometimes for life. Credit cards are only the surface. Mortgages are where the trap deepens. You were told buying a house was the smart move. Build equity, own an asset, live the dream. So you signed a 30-year mortgage. What they did not explain is that on a 30-year loan at 6% interest, you pay almost twice the original price by the end. Then there is your retirement account, if you even have one. You were told to contribute to a 401k, match your employer. Invest in the market, wait 30 years, and retire comfortably. But most people have no idea what they actually own. You choose funds suggested by human resources or based on recent performance. You do not understand the fees. You do not see how small percentages quietly drain decades of savings. And by the time you notice, there is no time left to fix it. This is not because you failed. It is because you were never meant to understand the game. The expense ratio is quietly shaving 1 or 2% from your returns every single year, compounded over decades. Those small fees cost you tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars. Money that should have stayed with you, silently redirected to fund managers. And even when your account grows, you remain hostage to timing you cannot control. If you plan to retire during the crisis of 2008, your savings were cut in half at the exact moment you needed them most. If you retire during the next crash, the result is the same. You spent 40 years feeding the machine, and whether you can actually stop working depends on forces entirely outside your influence. That is not security, that is dependence. Here is the pattern you need to recognize. Every major financial decision in your life has been engineered to move wealth upward. Your mortgage moves wealth to banks. Your credit cards move wealth to lenders. Your retirement account moves wealth to fund managers. Your taxes move wealth to governments that funnel it into subsidies and bailouts. Even insurance, health, auto, and home is a monthly transfer to corporations that profit most when they never have to pay you. You work 40 or 50 hours a week. You have done this for decades, and yet you are not wealthy. You are exhausted. You are anxious. You wonder whether retirement will ever actually happen. That is not personal failure. That is systemic success. You were never meant to accumulate wealth. You were meant to generate it for others while remaining tied to wages for life. Now consider inflation, because this is the invisible drain that has been hollowing you out for years. And this is where the picture darkens. The financial crisis of 2008 should have revealed how the system truly operates. Banks made reckless bets, bundled toxic mortgages, and nearly destroyed the global economy. Who absorbed the damage? You did. Your home lost value. Your retirement account fell by nearly half. Jobs vanished. Hours were cut. Meanwhile, the institutions that caused the collapse were rescued. Trillions in public money flowed to the same banks that created the disaster. Afterward, they emerged larger than before. Executives kept bonuses. Shareholders recovered. Ordinary people lost homes. Millions lost work. Savings disappeared. Retirements were pushed back by a decade or more. The lesson was unmistakable. When the system breaks, you carry the loss. When it recovers, they take the reward. Profits are private. Losses are shared. This pattern has persisted for generations, and it will not change because it benefits those with power. And it is happening again. During the pandemic period, the central bank created more than $4 trillion. They called it market stabilization. In reality, it inflated assets. Stocks reached record highs, property values surged. But who owns those assets? Not you. The wealthiest tenth of the population holds the overwhelming majority of stocks and a large share of real estate. So when new money was created, it flowed upward. The rich became dramatically richer. Your wages barely moved. Your savings earned almost nothing. Meanwhile, the cost of living exploded. Rent rose. Food rose. Fuel rose. Everything rose. The system was preserved for those at the top, and everyone else paid through inflation. There is no escape built in. That is not a flaw. That is the design. Wealth is concentrated upward and fueled by your labor. So ask the real question. Why were you never taught any of this? Why did you spend years memorizing facts you never use while learning nothing about how money actually works? Because financial literacy is dangerous to the system. People who understand compound growth invest early and gain independence. People who understand debt avoid it or use it deliberately instead of drowning in it. People who understand assets build income streams and reduce reliance on wages. People who understand inflation protect themselves instead of watching savings dissolve. The system requires financial ignorance, because ignorance creates dependence, and dependence creates control. You cannot leave a job you hate if debt owns you. You cannot take risks if every paycheck is already spoken for. You cannot retire if you never learned how to build wealth outside wages. The system needs you productive, compliant, and stuck. And the most effective way to ensure that is to never teach you how money truly works. History does not repeat, but it rhymes. Every empire and every economic order has relied on the same principle. Educate the majority just enough to function, but never enough to be free. In ancient Rome, they diluted the currency and insisted nothing had changed. In medieval Europe, rulers demanded forced loans and called it duty. In modern America, debt is sold as opportunity. Different ages. Same deception? Wealth flows upward. Dependence is maintained. Understanding is withheld. You are not taught about money because people who understand money do not remain trapped. And the system depends on you staying trapped. That is not a theory. That is economics. If this shifted your perspective, remember this. The answers are not hidden. They are written in history,